A Better World Blueprint. Good humans doing good things.
Hello, I'm Siobhan Hunt. As I head towards 50, I'm at that point where I'm wondering, how do I make this next chapter of my life count? How do I leave the world a better place than when I arrived? My aim is to find the answers by talking to people who are doing it right now. So, in each episode of this podcast, I'll speak to someone who's changing the world for the better. A little bit of hope when it seems there isn't much around. This is A Better World Blueprint.
Just a quick warning before we start. This interview has occasional salty language, so it may not be appropriate for all ears. Nic Marchesi and his best friend Lucas Patchett were in their early 20s when they had an idea. It involved a washing machine, a dryer, and the aim to restore dignity to homeless people in Brisbane. Now, a decade later, their company Orange Sky has delivered 1.9 million kilos of free laundry, 20,000 showers, and many, many hours of genuine, non-judgmental conversations. This is my chat with social entrepreneur Nic Marchesi. Hello, Nic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
You started doing Orange Sky very early in your career, I would say, before most people had even started their career. What led you to that work?
Yeah, so back in 2014, Lucas, my best friend, and I started Orange Sky, and Lucas and I were fortunate enough to go to school together in Brisbane, and that school had a food van that went out and fed people in our backyard that didn't have access to things that we'd taken for granted the majority of our life, things like something to eat, someone to talk to, and most importantly, a place to connect with other humans. So we were overwhelmed that there were people out there in our own backyard that were disconnected from the community. And through leaving school, we wanted to find a way to keep on contributing and supporting people in our own backyard. So had that crazy idea of chucking 2 washing machines and 2 dryers in a van and simply driving around and washing and drying clothes for free. And what we realized on the streets of Brisbane nearly 10 years ago was that it was much more than washing and drying clothes. It was actually an opportunity for people to sit down while the washing was on and connect.
And I'm just curious, because you're like fresh out of high school. Was there any time while you were thinking about the future where you had other ideas about what you'd like to do? Like, it's great that your school did it, but what was it that really sort of triggered that desire in you to continue this work after school?
Yeah, Orange Sky was just meant to be a little weekend project where we'd take a van out and go and help a few people. We never thought that Orange Sky would be this massive tree that it is now that so many people can contribute to. I guess, Lucas and I had different ambitions and careers. Lucas was at the top of the class. I was at the bottom of the class. I went into, the media industry, and Lucas went into studying mechanical engineering and commerce. So, starting an organization that would become a significant part of our lives wasn't the initial intention, but that has grown at so many inflection points at Orange Sky.
What made you keep going with it then, I guess? Because having the idea to help out in your own backyard is one thing. Developing an infrastructure for what you have today, which is all across Australia, thousands of volunteers and all those things that come with it, that's quite different. I mean, how did you move from the little backyard to the big picture that it is today?
Yeah, I mentioned before, we talk a lot about Orange Sky being this big tree, and Lucas and I were the people that planted the seed. And when we planted that seed, we didn't even really know what it would look like. We thought Orange Sky's first mission was to improve the hygiene standards of the homeless. Before we had the name of Orange Sky, we were thinking about calling it Brisbane Laundry Service. So I guess the frame that we were looking at is we just naively wanted to go out and help people. And a lot of people told us it was absolutely impossible to wash and dry clothes in a van. You would never get someone to trust you to wash and dry their clothes in a park. And for a long period of time, I think that challenge sort of is what excited us to help. And I think that sort of naivety and being 19 and sort of stubbornness to not take no as an answer got us to that first van, Sudsy, being built. But, we took the van out alongside our old school food van, set the van up, convinced this guy Jordan to give us some washings, and the van broke down. And that was a really shit feeling because we'd been added to this long list of people that throughout Jordan's life had let him down. And so we begged and pleaded this washing machine company that told us it wouldn't work for some more washing machines. We went out the next day. For whatever reason, Jordan was there again, and he was going to trust these two idiots to wash and dry his clothes. And the exact same thing happened. The van broke down and we let Jordan down. But that morning was a huge realization that there's this guy who has been constantly let down in his life who is keen to have his clothes washed. And so we begged and pleaded for some more washing machines. We went out the third day and again, there was Jordan. For whatever reason, he let us wash and dry his clothes, and then the van worked perfectly. But then we realized, what do we do now? Because Jordan's only possessions in his life were trapped in the van. We were tethered to the water in the park. And so it was this really simple opportunity to sit down and have a conversation. And that conversation changed all of our lives forever. But I think that, that was probably the first seed of Orange Sky, was this idea of hygiene and human connection coming together. But now, that tree, like you said, has got branches all around Australia and New Zealand. It's got thousands of volunteers. It's got thousands of donors. But most importantly, it's got thousands of people like Jordan who each and every week trust us. And I think, there have been the inflection points where, the donor writes a first check for $100,000 and we're like, that's the most amount of money we've ever seen. And they're like, go and build a van for your next van. And seeing, people who we walk past in the street being like, oh, I've used Orange Sky in Sydney and Melbourne, and Orange Sky helped me when my family's house got flooded in Lismore, or a donor, still giving to Orange Sky, or a volunteer still volunteering. So, yeah, I think, it's definitely snowballed, and that's been a reflection not of Lucas and I, but it's been a reflection of people from all around the world. But I also think, its intention wasn't to turn into this beautiful tree. It was meant to be a little backyard project.
You mentioned there a couple of challenges that you had in the early days. Were those the main stumbles, would you say, trying to get people to back and believe in the project? Or did you have other kind of challenges? Was there ever a crisis of confidence for you and your best friend going, this is crazy, how are we going to make this happen?
Absolutely. I think challenge, we always talk about challenge being a part of our DNA at Orange Sky, and we're working with people at potentially the toughest time in their life. We're working in funding a charity. We're working with volunteers. We're working with getting washing machines to work in a van. And I think there's definitely been moments where that challenge has become quite a burden on us and something that we've been quite confused by. But I also think that, at a point where we realize that challenge is a part of our DNA, actually creates this really beautiful space for people to come in and contribute. And I think, as a problem solver, I love challenges, and, hanging out with Lucas every day is a massive challenge. But, now I don't need to do that every day. But I think, this beautiful idea that if we acknowledge that friendships are beautiful, but they're also complex, or if we acknowledge that life is beautiful and complex, and if we acknowledge that when we do new things, it's probably going to be hard. I think that is actually something that, again, we've definitely had down days where we're like, this is fucked. But we've also had beautiful days where it's like, actually, this is why we're here, is for this challenge.
Speaking of those beautiful days, you've mentioned a few things there where people you've just seen on the street have kind of acknowledged the difference you've made in their life. I'm wondering if there are any stories that stick with you that really kind of hit you in the heart where you went, right, wow, this is making a huge difference.
Yeah, I think, it still gives me goosebumps each and every day thinking about that, in a sense of there are so many people and so many stories that come to mind. For me, we talk about Jordan being our first ever wash. And like I mentioned, Orange Sky's turning 10 this year. And probably for the last 9 years, we've never seen this guy again and never spoken about him. And, if you talk about being shit friends, we're probably a shit friend where, we're talking about him so much. He's such a pivotal part of our organization. But, where is Jordan? And earlier this year, we did a project where we did our first ever podcast, and we were fortunate enough to actually track down Jordan. And Jordan invited us into his own living room. And, it was this beautiful moment of a reconnection where we met Jordan at an incredibly tough time in his life. He met us at an incredibly tough time in our life where we're trying to get this van to actually work. And that moment was so important to him and so important to us, but we had just become disconnected by that reconnection point. So, Jordan is a huge inspiration for me, someone who had worked at Macquarie Bank in IT, had such a strong relationship with his family, and his first night being homeless was the day after his father's funeral. And the thinking there that, there is a person who is a future projection of my life, who has the same genetics, has the same passions and beliefs, has the same connection to his family, and has fallen on some tough times and been a part of Orange Sky Service. I think, there are thousands of loads of washing that happen each week now around Australia and New Zealand. And behind every load of those washing is someone like Jordan. But then also behind every load of washing is a volunteer. And, we've got volunteers who are too lonely and isolated and talk about not having friends in the community, and Orange Sky being the only outing they do each week that, is an opportunity to connect with other volunteers and to deliver the service. And, we've got school kids that fundraise for Orange Sky and say, hey, I'm doing the Sudsy Challenge at the moment. I'm wearing the same clothes for 3 days. So, there's behind each one of those communities, there are so many stories, but I think I always revert to Jordan.
How has this work changed you, do you think? I mean, you were so young when you started it. I don't know how you can make that comparison, but are you able to reflect on how it's changed you as a person?
Yeah, I turned 30 the other day, so maybe it's added a decade onto my life since we started, but it's been a beautiful, beautiful decade. And, I think, change is a massive thing to acknowledge as well. Like, that's a part of everyone's life, is that we go through changes for good and bad. And Orange Sky has been an incredibly positive change in my life. The perspective and understanding of homelessness and hardship in Australia, I could have never imagined. When I went to school, I thought someone who was homeless was a male sitting in a gutter. And that's only 6% of homelessness in Australia. We see parents who live in their car with their children, who work jobs and the kids go to school. We see people that have worked multiple jobs who live in affordable housing but can't afford to pay for laundry. We see people that never thought they'd be homeless suddenly become homeless in a natural disaster. So definitely the understanding of homelessness has been a massive change for me. The insight into trust and generosity in the community has absolutely blown me away. Never did I think that Orange Sky would have services all around Australia and New Zealand, and that's only possible by everyday people just saying, hey, I want to be a part of this. And the power of a team and, an idea that started, with that little seed in Brisbane being what it is. I think, my understanding of how things can grow has been a massive change. Some things haven't changed. Lucas and I are still friends. We still absolutely believe in what we do.
Thank you so much for your time today, Nic.
Thanks, friend.
Social entrepreneur Nic Marchesi. It's so interesting how different people think about problems and solutions, but I'm also interested in other things that influence these amazing people doing amazing things, like a quote that motivates them or the best piece of advice they were ever given. And if you'd like Nic's answers to those sorts of questions, check out the link in the episode notes. Next time, we're talking to stylist Amelia McFarlane about how fashion can be used for good and what she's learnt from styling women.
It's given me a really profound insight into how many women carry shame around their bodies.
That's in the next episode of A Better World Blueprint. If you'd like to listen to that one, make sure you subscribe. I'm Siobhan Hunt. See you next time.